I'd like to welcome Ben Provan. He's the CEO and co-founder of OpenDoor, which is a leading co-living brand and operator based in the San Francisco Bay Area. He creates co-living homes and apartments that bring residents together to share space and also to connect. It's an innovative housing model. It provides affordable rents and also a better living experience, and also good market returns, which of course are key. Please join me in welcoming to the stage Ben Provan.
Thank you. Hello, and thanks to the UDIA for having me here. Australia is a lovely country. It's my first time here, so it's been nice to learn about the country, but also some of the unique aspects of the real estate market, very different than the US in a lot of ways. For today, I'm going to be sharing about co-living, which is an emerging real estate trend in the US as well as in Europe. I'm going to be sharing quite a bit about the US context, but from what I've learned today, I think a lot of the trends and drivers are actually common with what's happening in Australia, so I hope you can glean some of the value from this and apply it to the local context. So I'm going to start with the demographics, the market, some of the trends that are making co-living a very exciting new space within the rental housing market in the US. And then I'm going to go into what co-living actually is and what it isn't, and then finish with a bit of information on OpenDoor and our flavor of co-living, as we are one of many co-living operators in the US and abroad. I think we'll give you a very specific sense of what it's like to live in a co-living space and what it's like to manage a co-living property. So building on many of the trends I think we've heard from several of the previous speakers, millennials, which is the target market of co-living, the housing products that we're building today are very much out of sync with their unique needs and preferences. They desire to live in urban areas that are connected, that are walkable, that there's great jobs. They're going away from suburbs, which was what the previous generation, the baby boomers, and to a certain extent the Gen Xers really preferred. They are, in the US, by and large, renters with the lowest rate of home ownership of any generation in the history of the US. They're deferring families. There's the student debt crisis in the US, which is having them not be able to afford to buy. But there's also lifestyle preferences, as we've heard, flexibility and the desire to move around and not have to own a home and furniture, and there's a burden of ownership that comes with that. And then lastly, they are not only digital natives, that's a term many of us I think have heard, but I like to refer to them as sharing economy natives, where they've grown up in a very different context, willing to share homes, whether it's Airbnb, willing to share cars or rides. I think if I had asked my parents even a decade ago if they could fathom people getting into cars with strangers and riding around, they would think it was implausible, but now that's very commonplace. And as a result, many millennials are choosing not even to own cars at all. So all that is to say the American dream is dead. I think I've heard from a few people there's the Australian dream. We have a very similar dream in the US, but it's not really the case anymore. That was the dream of the previous generation. And here's some statistics on the changing demographics in the US, where we're delaying marriage much further. It creates this stage of life post-university, pre-family, that there's a need for a social environment that's not going to be fulfilled by the traditional nuclear family. Home ownership rates are very much down within the demographics of young professionals, millennials. They're living in cities, as I mentioned, and they're moving towards alternative forms of transportation through the sharing economy, car sharing, Lyft, Uber, Zipcar, and whatnot. So, and another driver is what I refer to as the loneliness epidemic. We've heard quite a bit about how in this digital age, we're missing some of that face-to-face connection that is what makes us human. And the irony of it is we've never been more connected, but at the same time, we've never been more isolated and lonely and disconnected. And this is not unique to millennials, but the statistics show that they have it more acutely than anyone else, with rising rates of depression, and there's a real desire to connect. We've seen that in the co-working space, as that's completely disrupted office space in the office industry in the US. Now that is coming to residential. And then this is the real elephant in the room when it comes to co-living and rental in general, is the unaffordability of cities. We've heard quite a bit about that already. It's not just the cost of housing, but it's that ratio between the cost of housing and the income and wage increases that aren't keeping up with it. A fascinating and telling statistic is this: 88% of millennials who do not own a home either live with their parents or share an apartment. That's 88%. That is a massive percentage of the market. And what that tells me is that co-living is actually already happening. It's just not happening in a professional, managed, and intentional way. So we think we can do better. So we estimate the market to be 25 million people who are between the ages of 20 and 40 years old, which I just learned today is not just millennials, but also Gen Z, that are currently living with roommates or parents, and therefore looking for a better option, we like to say. But in addition, that is a conservative number, and we've seen this in our current renters. There is about 50% of the people who rent in our properties could afford to live on their own in a studio apartment or one-bedroom apartment, and they choose co-living as a lifestyle choice, not just because of the affordability needs that they have. So the shadow market of roommate rentals, we have something called Craigslist in the US that is very common. Already people are co-opting single-family homes, 3-, 4-bedroom apartments, doing co-living. So we think this is the market that we're trying to go after. So now let's talk about what exactly co-living is, now that you understand a bit of why co-living is become a trend. First, we have to talk about what it's not. There's a lot of misconceptions around what co-living is and what co-living isn't. So co-living is not a commune. That's a 1960s flavor of community, very much part of the hippie generation. Some of the defining aspects of communes is they tended to be rural. They tended to be very isolationist and withdrawing from society. And they tended to not really be successful because they didn't last. They weren't really a housing product. They were more of maybe a movement, if you will. It's also not co-housing. I would call co-housing the cousin of co-living. It's a model that I believe in Denmark is where it started, but it's an ownership model, typically suburban. It's usually structured as condos. People will own an individual home, and there'll be some common amenities, a common house that they own as well. But that's very much suburban and families and ownership versus rental. Co-living is also not micro units, but also shares some of the different aspects of micro units. I don't know how popular they are here, but in the US, they've become more and more popular as a way to get the cost of living down. They're typically sub 300 square feet apartments. I think that's roughly maybe 30 square meters. It's sort of, think of them as a bunch of sardines packed into a building. There's not much shared or communal space, but they do increase your yields on your rental properties, so that's very attractive, and they bring the cost of living down, but there really isn't a focus on community or any social aspects. Student housing is also not co-living, but again, a close cousin. The main difference being that co-living is young professionals and not focused at students, as well as co-living is in urban areas versus centered around universities. And then lastly, co-living is not random roommates. It's not 3 people renting a 3-bedroom home together. Maybe they found each other off Craigslist, maybe they're friends, but there's not a lot of intentionality, and it's not professionally managed. So that leads us to try to understand what co-living is. It's many things. You could look at it through a lot of different lenses, but it's certainly a response to the high cost of living in urban areas and the unique preferences of millennials. It's also modern, purpose-built shared housing, designed from the get-go to be for a shared lifestyle. It's intentionally managed and, very importantly, branded. All the co-living companies to date, including ourselves at OpenDoor, are branded experiences, and it's serviced. I also like to think of it as stage-of-life housing. It's post-college, but it's before you become a couple and start a family, which is typically the main reason we see people graduate from our co-living properties. And then also building on some of the trends that Richard shared about middle-income earners and trying to find solutions to them. It is a version of workforce housing, though importantly, it is non-subsidized. This is a for-profit model, not a subsidized or publicly funded model. So here's an example of a floor plan for co-living. I'll show some more later. But as a housing product, typically it's a bunch of private bedrooms. You're not renting a unit, you're renting a bedroom. In most of our new product that's in our pipeline, it's all ensuite bath, but there also can be shared bathrooms as well. Those open up onto shared living spaces that include a kitchen, dining, living space. They're typically well-amenitized properties. As you heard with, I believe, Chris from Graystar yesterday, he talked about that in a traditional apartment product where you have roof decks and gyms and lounges. That all is the case as well, beyond just the more intimate shared living area. And it's a cheaper price point. We target typically between a 20 and 30% discount to a comparable studio apartment product in a similar neighborhood. As an experience, we've heard a lot about how millennials prefer experiences. We start in Coliving day one thinking about what's that experience we want our residents to have. It starts with the design in terms of how we design the interiors of the properties and furnish the common areas. It includes programs and events and social experiences, from things like community dinners to workshops and speaker series, things that activate the community and bring people together. It's tech-enabled, and there's an aspect of community management where we're providing the tools for people to connect, to share resources, book rooms, communicate and collaborate with one another. That is a whole layer on top of the physical real estate. And then it includes value-added services from regular cleanings of the common areas to grocery services, insurance services, things that we can tack on to continue to add to that lifestyle. Here is a breakdown of economics. These are for Oakland, California, where many of our properties are based. It shows you how, compared to both living in sort of an informal shared apartment and living in a studio apartment, co-living is price competitive, between an 8 and 32% savings. And it's not just your rent. It includes all the other services, the shared groceries, we're able to bundle the utilities for Wi-Fi and all the other services and bring that cost down for our residents. So in that way, it's very attractive to people who are already having trouble affording living in expensive cities like San Francisco. But this is where it gets interesting. And as developers, this is what should probably pique your attention a little bit. The power of sharing not only brings down that cost of living for our residents, not only does it give them access to more space, which is, this is surprising. You'd think they're getting smaller spaces, but they actually, because of the common areas, which are not a problem for people, they're actually the most utilized areas in our spaces. People love to connect. They love to hang out. They love to share meals. So those are heavily used spaces. So not only do residents pay less, get access to more space, but the properties themselves outperform traditional apartment for rent products. We typically see between a 30 and 50% increase in gross rents, which can lead to, if you look at the center column there on the investment side, 100 to 200 basis point increase in the yield on cost, which is, in the rental apartment world, massive. And that's the difference between a project penciling and a project not. On the tenant side, you see all the benefits, but one thing I'll point out there, in addition to the economic savings, in addition to the additional access to space, it is a better experience. We have many renters who choose to live in Coliving when they could afford to live somewhere else. They want this, not just because they have to live there, but because they want to live there. It outperforms traditional apartment products economically, but then also for developers, it's very competitive because projects that may not pencil, and especially in the US, we have a market where the returns are beginning to compress because it's such a strong real estate market. Price of land is going up, price of construction is going up, so there needs to be creative solutions to get to higher returns to make it pencil. So co-living is a way that can actually open up opportunities that otherwise wouldn't pencil. But another important aspect is the acceleration of approvals and a very positive narrative that, typically we've heard about this NIMBY, conflict between a developer and the public and the citizens in an area. Well, co-living actually provides a market-based solution to affordability that, in our experience and the approvals in our projects, actually helps us go much more quickly through the approval process and garner the support of the people living in the areas where we're developing. So overall, what does that mean? Within the rental institutional asset class market, we see co-living becoming a new asset class over the next decade. We think a lot about student housing, which 10, 15 years ago was not a institutional grade asset class and now is. We see co-living moving into that space over the next 10 years. It really is somewhere between multifamily, which is build-to-rent product, and hospitality. And it's very much driven by these unique preferences, needs of millennials. So to give you a sense, there's quite a few players in the space now. If I put this slide up 3 years ago, there'd maybe be 3 people on this slide, but it's a very exciting time to be in co-living. WeWork has a product called WeLive. There's many other companies, both in the US but also in Europe. So you can start to see it really pick up steam. And then the last thing I'll say on co-living is some of the other benefits beyond the economics. There's a community benefit, as we've heard about this need for social connection. We heard, I think, Susan yesterday talking about how that not only is good for you, but it helps you live longer. So these are spaces that bring people together to actually have that authentic human connection that is so fundamental to what it is to be human. Affordability, of course, is a major benefit in terms of lowering not just the rents, but the overall cost of living for people and making middle-income owners in the workforce, including those service workers Richard talked about, that gives them a place that they can actually afford to live in cities where the jobs are. On the sustainability front, there's also a lot of benefits. By sharing space, sharing resources, instead of 15 people having 15 washers and dryers, 15 dishwashers, 15 stoves, they can share those resources, which not only reduces their cost, but reduces the need to create as many products and create more waste. And then sustainability-wise, 40% of the greenhouse gas emissions globally are from buildings, but most of that is not the operation of the buildings, but in the embodied energy and carbon of the materials themselves, the steel, the concrete, and when you increase the density of buildings by approximately 2x, which is what you do with co-living, you're getting way more utility out of that building as a result of that. So I want to end with talking about OpenDoor specifically and our flavor of co-living. For us, we think of 4 things when we think about designing our co-living product and the co-living experience for our residents. It has to be connected. We look in urban areas exclusively. Right now, we're in the Bay Area and Portland with projects in our pipeline in Seattle, Denver, and Los Angeles. Home is affordable. Again, not just rents, but the overall cost of living. And we look for ways we can drive through the economies of sharing, different ways people can save through the different service offerings we provide. Home as a service. This gets to that millennial lifestyle where they want more things curated on their behalf. So there's a lot we do from the design side to the furnishing side, to having different technology tools and offerings that make their experience of renting better. And then lastly, and most importantly, home is a lifestyle platform. We don't see this as just a housing product. It is a lifestyle that our residents are buying into when they rent. That includes connections and introductions to other people within the community and all the benefits that come with that, which I'll talk more about shortly. So our resident experience, we create a community experience for our residents, a shared lifestyle experience. They rent private rooms, coming together in the common areas to gather, to attend events, to connect with one another, to attend community dinners. It's very much about the social experience, and it's a very self-selecting group. We don't just throw random people into a home and hope that they get to know each other. We choose people who want to live in co-living. We do a lot of work to build that sense of community. We facilitate workshops. All that is so that people get a lot of value beyond just the unit that they sleep in. This is a saying I love that really speaks to some of the intangible value of living in co-living. You're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. That, of course, is beyond just co-living as something worth thinking about, but who you surround yourself with, who you spend the most time with, has a huge impact on who you are as a person, how you learn, how you grow. We say this every resident, when we onboard them, we say this quote to them, and we really encourage them to build meaningful and lasting relationships with the people that live in their home. So this is a short video I want to share with you about the resident experience in one of our homes in Oakland.
Really powerful when you get to share intimate space with lots of people. So often only our family or our closest friends get to see us, like really see us. Otherwise, we get to put up a guard and kind of keep a little bit of distance between our true selves. What I love about co-living is it keeps you really honest. You get to see all your parts and share them with all these people around you and be seen by community in a really powerful way that allows you to continually expand who you are and be the people that we say we want to be.
So that hopefully gives you a little better sense of the resident experience video we created a couple years ago. So in terms of the management side of it, how do we as a company continuously and repeatably create that kind of experience for our residents? What do we do? Well, we start with this simple premise called Live Better Together. We truly believe we're creating a better way to live. This is not just a way to live a little more cheaply, a little more efficiently. This is actually, for a certain demographic in the market, a better way to live. So we always look for how can we design the best residential experience that reduces the friction of shared living while maximizing its benefits. So here's some of the things we do. On the service side, we furnish all the common areas beautifully. We put a lot of time and energy into design so people feel like they're getting more than they would living on their own. Not just more space, but better space. High quality furnishings, high quality interior finishes. And we can afford to invest in those because they're being shared by 12, 15, 16 people. We, of course, use all modern technology amenities. We have Wi-Fi built in. It's included with rent. Make it very easy for people. We also have a shared grocery service, a shared food program that not only is more convenient because the food's there, but also saves quite a bit on your groceries. For typically $200 or less a month, we're able to get all of your groceries and staples for our residents. But not only do they get all their groceries, they're better. We're sourcing from local and organic farms in the San Francisco Bay Area. We can get wholesale pricing through the bulk purchasing for that many people. So again, we're able to deliver something better at an equal or lower cost. Culturally, we put a lot of energy into the team building and community building exercise. When residents join our communities, we help them connect with one another. We theme each of our spaces, and we create a very community-led process in which the residents get to say who they want to be as a community. What shared interests do they have? What shared values do they have? What types of activities do they want to do together? We have on-site resident community managers, similar in student housing to what we in the US call RAs, or resident assistants. That helps us from a management side understand what's going on in each of the communities, but also gives a single point of contact for the residents to get questions answered or have complaints or anything that they need in order to communicate to us. There's someone on site that they can work with. And then we do go through a sophisticated resident matching process that enables us to filter for the right matches for people. Some of that we do on our end, but some of that we let the residents do. We have something called a dinner view, which is a interview over dinner in which applicants get to meet the residents living in the space, and the residents get to meet the applicants and make selections on who that person is. And then, as I mentioned, technology, everything we're doing, 100% digital, paperless, very efficient, very much in line with the expectations of a millennial renter. We also provide software for collaboration that enables people to coordinate and communicate things like, hey, I'm going to go out to dinner tonight. Who would like to join me? Or I'm thinking of going skiing this weekend. I have a rental. Maybe we can share the cost of that. Or just saying hi to one another and communicating almost like its own social network within each of the communities. And then we do integrate smart home technology from automatic keypads to iPads outside the common areas, things that make it easier for people to interact with the space and has a modern feel that is very important to our renters. So some statistics on OpenDoor specifically. We've never paid for advertising. We have a wait list of over 2,000 people. That speaks to the demand for co-living and for affordability in housing, particularly in the San Francisco Bay Area. Our vacancy rate all time is under 0.5%. The national average is 5%. The average within the San Francisco Bay Area is 3%. It's a very sticky product. People really want it. Also, 25% annual turnover rate and an average tenure of 2.5 years. That's actually better than the traditional rental market. And I think that surprised me as well as many people I share that with, because they just assume this is a short-term lifestyle rental product. People are going to come, they're going to go, they're going to move on. But it actually outperforms traditional rental apartments in the US. And then the last statistic, which I love, is 95% referral rate from existing residents. And that is because people would rather live with someone they know and they like and they've met than a stranger. And there's a lot we do on the marketing side that encourages that. We provide listing pages unique to each of our communities for people to share within their social networks, and leveraging social media and a lot of the ways that people connect and communicate for particularly millennials to then drive a lot of our marketing activities. So this is more on the real estate side of things. Our business model is we're first and foremost a brand operator. where we partner with owners and developers to manage properties, but we also do, in about 20% of our properties, co-development. We have 8 properties and 98 beds under management currently. That will double within the next 8 to 12 months. We have a total of 11 properties and over 500 beds in our 24-month pipeline. And then in terms of future pipeline deals, we're underwriting deals, we're negotiating with partners, we're well over 1,500 beds. So our company itself is growing very quickly, but also the industry as a whole, many companies have quite a large amount of pipeline. And I think more than anything else, the driver for that is I meet with so many developers in the US that can't get their rental projects to pencil, and so they're very interested in getting that increase in yield. And then scale. We started with existing homes where we did an adaptive reuse approach where we renovated them, added bedrooms, built out the common areas. Now we have a bunch of new product coming online over the next year, and then in the next 2 to 3 years, we have larger multifamily mid-rise properties in the 50 to up to 160 bedroom range. I'll show you some floor plans shortly so you can get a sense of what that looks like. But it's becoming both scaling horizontally and vertically. And then we've been able to establish a well-known brand in the US. It's a very fun and exciting topic within real estate. People love it because it's innovative, it's new, it's different. We've had a lot of great press on co-living that's helped popularize the concept and really distinguish it from, I think, some of the other forms of community that I talked about earlier in terms of communes and co-housing, and really position it more in line with co-working and the modern, urban, millennial-based kind of flavor of community. So for my last couple slides, I just want to show you a few floor plans for some of our pipeline projects, just to kind of really ground it, what co-living looks like at a real estate level. This is one in Berkeley. This is a floor. There's a total of 5 stories of residential over podium. It's mixed use, ground floor. This, you'll see, it's really two co-living pods, as we call them, per floor, on the left and the right. And you can see that beautiful big common area in the middle where people gather, and then you can see all the bedrooms on the 2 sides. So these, I believe, are 14 bedrooms per pod. Each of those will have its own community manager. That repeats up the building. So for one building, we actually will have multiple communities, multiple pods that we kind of subdivide the building into. And we found that ensuite bath product really is a great product for us because it both appeals to people who would be comfortable living with roommates, but also people who might be thinking about a studio apartment and value a good amount of privacy. Maybe they don't want to share a bathroom, but they still want to be able to hang out in the common areas, join for dinners, join for events and whatnot. And this is a property in Oakland in our pipeline. We'll be opening in about 18 months. This one has a little bit different approach to the typology, where it's split between shared baths. You'll see, maybe I can get this laser pointer to work. There's 2 4-bedroom apartments there that have shared bath, and then 8 studio apartments up there. Those are really micro studios. You can see they're about 300 square feet, which is pretty small for a studio. And then that common area is right there. And one of the considerations in developing any project, particularly now in kind of the earlier stages of the industry, is what we call backwards compatibility. So what happens if, for whatever reason, in 10, 20 years, maybe you want to do something other than co-living? That comes mostly from the banks, who are the most conservative in the capital stack. And so this one, you could easily convert those 2 4-bedroom apartments into 2-bedroom apartments, and you can rent the studios as is. So it kind of balances the risk management needs with obviously optimizing the product for the lifestyle of co-living. So hopefully that gives you a sense of co-living. Thank you so much for listening, and excited to answer some of your questions.
Well, I have to tell you that the top-rated question is indeed the question that I would like to ask you first. Who does clean the kitchen?
So we have professional cleaners come, typically monthly, to do
monthly.
Monthly, yes,
to
do deep cleans. But we found early on, if we cleaned too often, people would just leave a mess. So there's a lot we do in terms of the policies of how you manage the common areas, the expectations set with residents, where people clean up after themselves. I mean, every sink in every one of our spaces has a sign over that says, no dishes in the sink.
And what do you do if there are? I mean, there's so many things I was thinking about. What about if the guitar player is absolute crap and is doing your head in when you're trying to watch television?
Yeah.
Or the kitchen is a mess, or someone eats your vegan rice or whatever.
Right.
How do you deal with that?
Funnily enough, we mostly don't have to. A lot of that is self-managed by the community. Occasionally, we can step in and enforce a policy or deal with some conflict resolution. But mostly, there's such a social accountability, and a lot of that comes from that upfront process of building community where people self-police quite a bit. We actually see it as a breakdown in our process if we have to step in to solve that type of problem.
And you're very clear that you've got a sophisticated process of not putting random people together. But there is a question here about, do you get professional groups together, lawyers, musicians? I mean, is there a tendency of like for like attracting like?
It tends to not so much be around professional types of people, more around interests. We do have one of our communities called the Canopy, which is very much around creativity and creative expression. So it has people who are more artists, designers. We have some event producers. So it's not specifically around that profession, but because of the interests, people do tend to be more in one profession or the other. But we have certain other themes we have, just to give examples, are we have one that's a very outdoorsy home. People like to go backpacking, like to go out skiing on weekends. We have one that's very food-centric. They're foodies, so they do big meals. They have a garden on the side of the house. So that's an example of some of the different flavors of the communities.
And how does the shared grocery thing, sorry, I'm fascinated in this, I hope you are, but how does the shared grocery thing work? I mean, anyone who's lived in a shared house knows that experience of there's no milk because someone drank it.
Yep.
How do you control that?
Yeah, so it's not every grocery, first of all. If you want your vegan milk or your special bar, maybe you buy that on your own, but it's all the core staples. And we have a food manager who's a resident who does the ordering, and we have relationships with the vendors. And it comes once to twice a week. It's all delivery services. In the Bay Area, we're fortunate enough that you can get incredible food delivered to your doorstep. So when it runs out, and then you'll get some the next week. And I would say it's probably about 80% of people's food is covered through that, and then people will keep some of their own items.
How transferable do you think this is outside the Bay Area? The Bay Area is a particular area.
Absolutely, yeah. It's very popular in New York right now. Almost all of our competitors are based in New York. In Europe as well, there's several companies. There's one in London called The Collective, the Medici Group in Germany. So I think it's very transferable to developed nations, because it's very much, it's a lifestyle choice. I think people who are looking for that community experience, looking to connect. It's not a product out of necessity, even though it does meet some of those economic needs. I think culturally speaking, it surely would be transferable to Australia. I think the question I have is around the bias towards ownership here versus rental. Our competition is build-to-rent product for the most part. We're not competing with people who are trying to buy homes.
So how do you see, and that is a question here from the floor, yesterday we heard from Greystar, how do you see this as different to build to rent, particularly when you showed up there in one of your latter slides, the micro studios, which would seem to undermine your very model in a way?
So micro studios specifically have a lot of backlash in the US. It sort of is the worst of all worlds, because you're taking this idea of densification, which we're doing as well, but you're really not providing any opportunities for community. So people feel it's taking advantage of the renter, whereas we've been able to create a really positive narrative around how much people need community and how they're getting access to more for less in our model. So I think in some ways...
But in some of your developments, you have micro studios.
We do, but then you have the common areas that they have access to. Yes.
But why put them in? I understand your banking reason, but is that the only reason? Because in any other look at it, it would appear to undermine what you're trying to achieve.
Yeah, so sometimes the common areas are within units, and sometimes they're external. And that has a lot to do with the different zoning and permitting laws within each city. And so Coliving it doesn't really fit too many of the different typologies that are currently allowable in different cities, so we often have to kind of hack it in, though that's changing. London recently passed I believe they're one of the first cities to pass a co-living ordinance, as well as San Jose in California just a month ago passed a co-living ordinance, and that really defines it in a way that protects renters, but also makes it easier for us as companies to go in and develop.
Well, that is a question. Have you had any issues with obtaining government approvals, objections from adjoining residents, the boarding house stigma, which is definitely a stigma in this country, and how have you overcome them?
Yeah. Generally, we actually do better than a comparable build-to-rent product because people see us doing more to build community and benefit people and create affordable housing. We've gotten a lot of support from neighbors on that front. The issues we've gotten are not any different than what you would get of the normal apartment builder, where people are concerned about shade or just large, tall buildings in their neighborhood. So we unfortunately can't beat that one. I think in terms of backlash against sort of a boarding house, a fear of maybe a flop house or boarding house, we early on got that, but that's almost completely gone now. And I think in the U.S., there's been so much press around co-living. I think people are becoming more aware of what this is, and their fears are kind of fading away as a result.
Are there issues, though, around density? You're putting a lot of people in a relatively small space.
Right. I mean, we see it as we're actually giving them more space. Even though it is higher density, instead of 500 square feet, you get 1,500 square feet because of the sharing of common area. So from a resident experience perspective, no concerns there. The main issues we get around density when it comes to cities is there's a lot of affordable housing requirements that are defined by unit. So if you build 100 units, you need to do 10 units as affordable. Co-living doesn't really fit within that framework because we might do 8-bedroom units. And so we can vastly reduce our unit count even though we're increasing our bedroom count. So there's been a little tension there, and mostly that's the cities reacting to us, trying to scramble to figure out how do they actually permit co-living. So mostly it actually works in our favor now.
Because you get fundamental change, but without that, you'd be stuck, wouldn't you?
Yes, but fortunately most of our goals are aligned with the goals of cities in terms of affordability. Also in the US, there's quite a bit of a move towards low to no parking requirements, and because our renters tend to be millennials and they use Uber, they share cars, they bike, they use scooters, we don't want parking. We don't see that as a need for them, and so it fits with a lot of the urban development goals of the city.
That was another question, particularly if you develop somewhere with little or no public transport, do you provide parking spaces?
We don't develop anywhere where there's not access to public transportation. Our demographic wants to live in the dense areas. Some of our properties are closer or farther, but usually within a mile of either a train line or a major bus line. And even now, I don't know if it's the same here, but we have scooters everywhere in the Bay Area, and so you can hop on these little shared scooters and zip around and get around pretty easily.
What's the average age?
29 for our company.
Do you have a limit at which you have to leave?
No, we actually can't legally due to fair housing laws in the US.
Would you? You could?
I don't think so. I think that the main challenge is when people want to have a family. It just does not fit families currently.
So it's a no kids policy?
Well, we're not allowed to have a policy around that, but people self-select out. Because you can't discriminate based on.
So you could have a single parent in there with a child?
We could, and we've had a few kids, and after about a year, they've all chosen to leave when their lease is up, and I think for good reason. But that being said, there's quite a bit of demand. We got a lot of people reaching out to us on our website about a family version of this. I don't think community is unique to millennials. We also get downsizing baby boomers who, they're empty nesters. They don't need to have a big home in the suburbs. They want to have a more live-in-place lifestyle. So they like the idea of maybe having a smaller apartment in the city and also connecting with people at different ages. So I think we'll eventually get there in terms of our product, but it's a different enough product that we have to stick with our kind of young professional flavor of co-living for now.
So what's the single versus couples ratio, and what's the sex ratio, male versus female?
Yep. So the sex ratio is almost exactly 50%, and that is something that we try to do gender balance. It's important to us. 20% of our residents are couples, and so which was actually higher than I initially expected. But so the two major reasons people move out, one is they get a job elsewhere in the country, and they move for that reason. But the other is that they want to start a family or buy a home. So we've seen it really is the stage of life product before you want to go off and start a family. And I think in that way, millennials still do want to own homes by and large, but later.
So how do you choose the tenants? And I suppose, by this is a question from the floor, but you did put up, you had a really long waiting list.
Yep.
So how do you decide who's in and who's out? And this is another question, do current tenants get to veto new tenants?
So the selection process involves first a filtering from us around basic income requirements, If they can pay, we do a background check as well, make sure they're upstanding citizens that we would want living in our homes. And then we have a very extensive survey that gets at who they are as a person, not just how much money they make, but why do they want to live in co-living? What are their goals? What do they want to learn as a human being? And then we use that to try to match them to the homes. And then the residents are very involved in that selection process. I mentioned the interviews, but also there's an online forum where they can sort of read about the residents, vote on them.
So you can actually go online and see who's looking to apply and say, yeah, I'll live with that person. No, I won't live with that person.
Yes. First, we filter them to them, as well as there's quite a bit of people that come through the networks of our residents, so they kind of come pre-filtered. We mostly allow veto power because we have so much demand. Ultimately, we can at any time place someone. I mean, as a management company, we have to be able to do that. But for us, that's a breakdown in the model if we have to do that. But
have you knocked people back and just said this is not for you?
We've never kicked anyone out who's already lived there. We never had to do that, though we actually built in some protections for that if need be. But we've definitely turned people away that we thought wouldn't be a match. But mostly that sorts itself out when they meet the residents, and usually you can tell if someone's not a right match, and they'll let us know.
There's lots and lots of questions about how you manage problem tenants.
Yes. Mostly we don't have them. I mean, our philosophy is an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. And so, if you do a good job selecting people up front and then onboarding them well to the policies, to the expectations of living and co-living, that eliminates 95% of your problems. But there is quite a bit of social accountability to where if people are bad actors, it's no fun to live in a house where no one likes you. So we have had a few people self-select out. And then we've had to step in twice, I believe, in the history, our 5-year operating history, we've had to step in twice to manage a conflict. And we, got the people involved into a facilitated conversation. But it's very minor part of what we do. And I think the thing that people don't always get is how people are really game to participate in this model. They want to make it the best experience. They want to show up well for their housemates. They want to, build those relationships. And if you're not a good person, you're not going to do a very good job at that. So a lot of it, there's some kind of natural checks and balances there.
Please join me in thanking Ben very much for telling us about one form of co-living.
Thank you.